Gosh! Woo-hoo!
Good morning.
Good morning,
Okay,
Maya.
I can see. Yes, good morning to everybody watching us. This is Japanese Politics One-on-One, where we talk about the latest events in Japanese politics. Today, I believe we're going to talk again about tariffs and then the possible double election in Japan coming this summer, and also some other issues that impact the economy and also the life of everybody in Japan and their businesses. So, Timothy, let's see what we're going to talk about today.
Thank you very much, Maya. Today I am once again reporting from the deck of the good ship Grimm's in Katsuyama. It has been raining most of the morning. The forecast was that it's going to end in time for us to have our briefing. It's just drizzling a little bit, so I think for the time being I'll hold the umbrella. But today we're going to talk about what's going on in Japanese politics. Thanks very much for everybody joining us. We'll try and get through the top news stories and then open it up to the always robust and very informative Q&A period. Maya, the yen closed out this weekend at $144.86 to the yen. That's a little bit of a strengthening, and I'd like to get into the details of that later on in the briefing. But in other news, the Prime Minister is in town all this week. He was in town most of last week, and as you might recall, he was flooded with visitors from overseas. A lot of countries' heads of state were in Tokyo to attend the expo and their countries' pavilions. And so he had something going on almost every day, sometimes twice a day. And that really complicates his schedule, because not only is he fighting off a no confidence motion from the opposition party, he also passed the pension reform bill legislation and also brought onto his cabinet a new minister, the Minister of Agriculture, and the rice prices and that sort of thing. It was just a really tumultuous week. He is also fighting off a no confidence motion and threatening, if you guys don't get your act together, I'm going to close down the House on my own volition. So the Prime Minister in Japan has that authority to close down the House at any time. And within just several days, he could call for an election. So he's threatening the opposition parties with that. And apparently they're not being very cooperative. We thought that there was a little bit of more cooperation going on with the passage of the reform legislation, but not so much. Today, it marks the 2-week deadline for the closure of this diet session. So this diet session ends in 2 Sundays, which really means it probably ends on a Friday. So there's only 12 days left for them to debate many of the things that they've got going. For those of you that are living in Tokyo, you will have noticed the boards, the plywood boards that are going up in the stations and in the neighborhoods for people to put their faces, the poster faces, for their candidacy for the Tokyo metropolitan election. So that's up. And that will be a voting day on the same day that the diet ends its session on the 22nd. So that's something to look forward to. South Korea elected a new president. He was elected on Tuesday, and he's from the opposition camp for Mr. Yoon, who was the previous president. He was ejected. He was impeached. He gave it up. A 60-day election campaign ended on Tuesday with the new president in party now. Yosei Akazawa, who is the minister for revitalization and the chief negotiator on the Trump tariffs, left on Wednesday night, arrived in Washington, D.C., had talks on Thursday and Friday, and is on his way back to Tokyo to report to the prime minister and to get marching orders there. Also, there's the expo is 50 days old. It's a 6-month process. They're 50 days into it. It's beginning to pick up a little bit of speed, and that's good news for people who live in Osaka, and also Ishinokai, that it's beginning to pick up a little bit of momentum there. They really need that. And the emperor and the empress visited Okinawa this week in commemoration of the preparation for the end of the war. The war ended on August 15th, but before that, there was the huge battle in Okinawa. First, Iwo Jima was fell, and then Okinawa. Okinawa was a 90-day battle, and in recognition of the suffering of the people from Okinawa, the emperor and the empress visited there for a 2-day visit. It's somewhat rare, but it's somewhat meaningful as well. I'll get into that and some of the other issues that are hitting us, Maya. I'd like to turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And to everybody once again who has been with us since the very beginning and continue to be here every Sunday morning. Thank you very much for joining again today. And if you are busy this morning, please remember that you can watch these briefings on YouTube and LinkedIn even after we finish them, even after we finish the live stream. Another thing is, if you are watching us on any of the social media, please let us know that you have been there. So hit like or subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you can receive the notifications for these briefings and you can follow them as well. In addition to this, these briefings also are followed by a synopsis that is prepared by Timothy's team in Langley Esquire, and it is sent out by a newsletter. So usually it happens a couple of days after we live stream the briefings. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to subscribe. The company is on Substack. If you cannot find the account there, let me know and I'll help you with that. And Timothy, it's over to you now.
Okay, Maya, today is our 226th episode.
Yes.
And if you divide the year into to 52 weeks, we are almost at our 4.5-year mark. And that means for 4.5 years, you and I have been here every Sunday reporting on what's going on in Japanese politics, geopolitics, what's going on with the government here every Sunday. So the audience continues to grow. The richness and the texture of the Q&A just continues to get better and better. And I'm just really grateful for everybody tuning in.
Very much so, yes. Thank you. And now let's go into the details of the briefing.
Okay. So as I said, the yen closed out on Friday at 144.86 yen to the dollar. That is a 0.5% increase from this time last year. There was some light vacillation between 142 to 144, almost 145 over the week. And that explains some of the volatility in the markets and also geopolitics. It reflects this complex interplay between the economic indicators, not just here in Japan, but also geopolitical developments. The U.S. labor market contracted in May, and so it had an effect on the Japanese volatility for yen-dollar exchange. This is the first time for the labor market to contract in a year, so it is a sign of the U.S. dollar weakening somewhat. In addition, the Fed outlook is likely to be a little bit tighter for the dollar in September. So there might be another interest rate increase in September. So they're projecting a couple of months in advance, but it does have an impact on what's going on here in Japan and what foreign money does with the Japanese yen compared to the U.S. dollar. There are also trade tensions that impact the value of the yen. The U.S.-China in particular are really beginning to show not much progress as the market is looking forward to. There's uncertainty and currency valuations are fluctuating as a consequence of that, in particular with the rare earth metals that are being kind of restricted by Chinese as their negotiating point. But, President Xi and President Trump did have a conversation. They spoke for 90 minutes early in the week. So they did promise and they got, mutual invitations, love kisses. Why don't you come visit? You and your wife come visit us in China. And the president said, yes, we would love to do that. And please, why don't you come visit us in the United States? So it looks like there's a little bit of movement going on there. The outlook for the value of the yen is potential strengthening if U.S. indicators continue. So if the U.S. dollar begins to weaken a little bit because of labor statistics, because of the U.S. market there, then the yen becomes a more attractive magnet for foreign funds. And there is a bullish correction that is expected to be in the 146. So we're at 144 right now. If it passes 146.8, gets towards 147 yen to the dollar, it begins, that's a kind of a trigger point that people are watching. So people are looking forward to that. And then the bottom of that is a 133. So there is some expectation that the yen will fluctuate in between there. But if it breaches the 146.9 or it goes below the 143, those are like a trigger mechanism. And then it could cascade either higher or lower. The MUFJ Bank predicts that there will be a decline to 144 yen to the dollar by the end of Q2. That means probably 142 within June. And they anticipate probably a window of 142 to 150 yen to the dollar. It looks like it stopped raining. And so all eyes are looking at the Bank of Japan and what's going on with the trade talks. The Prime Minister, as I mentioned, will be in Tokyo all this week. He was in Tokyo most of last week, but this week there's very few unexpected diplomatic visits on his schedule. Heavy on domestic consumption, the price of rice, and the double election discussions. I think that's going to occupy most of his time this week. Inflation and wages and the Trump tariffs are weighing heavily on this prime minister and his cabinet. They had a cabinet meeting to talk about rice this week and a revision of the rice policy where the Japanese government supports rice prices. It supports farmers. It tells them how much money they will get for their rice. Unfortunately, the rice farmers are dwindling. The average age, if you read the piece on food security that was published by Langley Esquire maybe 2 weeks ago, you'll know that the average age of rice farmers or farmers in general in Japan is almost 69 years old. And there's nobody to succeed them. Their sons have gone on to universities and moved to the higher population areas of Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Fukuoka. And so the number of farmers is really decreasing. So the Japanese government is trying to address that by making it more attractive for people to stay into farming and also to initiate more hybrid, high-tech AI technologies into farming. So there is a bit of a, what would you say, a revitalization of agriculture going on here. It's been locked in a very traditional series, and the Japan Agricultural Association has suffered a lot of criticism. So we're looking forward to some progress there. And also, with regard to the new agricultural minister, Mr. Koizumi, there is a lot of anticipation going on there. It's used by the LDP as a kind of activator to generate more and more interest in the LDP, in the price of foods and the decrease of inflation, hopefully. And all of this is gearing up to an election in the upper house. So the prime minister is also focusing on what's going on with the opposition parties. We had thought here on this program that since they were able to pass the pension reform by joining hands with the Constitutional Democratic Party, the LDP, and Komeito, that now maybe they had made some inroads into having some sort of maybe a coalition with the three parties, and the Constitutional Democratic Party would move forward, and then the LDP would be able to get out of this mess that it has, where it's deficient in 13 seats in the lower house. It can't pass legislation. It has to be nice to people it doesn't want to be nice to. It has to negotiate with the opposition parties that it just really has to hold its nose and negotiate. This prime minister has been relatively successful in doing that, but it's really tiresome. They have no muscle memory in doing that. I mean, for the last 30 years, the LDP has been able to basically call the shots and tell people what it's going to do because it held a majority. And it doesn't have that. So that's the conundrum that this prime minister is in right now. What does he do to succeed in covering that gap? We have an election for the upper house. We've talked about it endlessly here on this program, but that's for the upper house. The upper house, the LDP and Komeito already hold a majority in the upper house by a comfortable margin. They can go into the upper house elections and lose a dozen seats and still be okay. But the lower house is where legislation really matters and where you need to have that majority vote. They don't have that. And however they do in the upper house, it doesn't repair that deficiency. And that's why the prime minister is constantly thinking, what do we do with, how do I solve that? Do I form a coalition with one of these bums that I really don't like to talk to, but I have to because one of them has more than 3 of them have more than 13 votes. The other opposition parties don't even have 13 seats in the lower house. So I'm not even talking to them. But the Constitutional Democratic Party has almost 150. Ishin has 138. The Democratic Party for the People has 28. So one of those 3 is potentially somebody that I perhaps could get into bed with. I think he's considered that and decided it's not going to work. We've tried it. It's just going to be the same thing. If we form a coalition, then we're going to still fight on many of the policies and the government's not going to work. We need to be in charge. So that's why I think over the last 8 or 10 days, the prime minister has said, look, if you guys don't cooperate, by my own volition, I'm going to close down the lower house. So in Japan's parliament, the prime minister has the power to close down the lower house, and call for a snap election. He can do that, and he only needs maybe 10 or 12 days for him to close down the house and initiate an election. So there's plenty of time for him to do that so that the 2 election days fall on the same date. We will not quite know what his decision is going to be until we get closer to the time for election. So if the election has been called for July 22nd. So that's quite a ways away if the prime minister only needs about a week to close down the lower house. So the campaigning for the lower house is, I believe, 12 days. For the upper house, it's a couple of days more, maybe 15 days. So we would have maybe a 2-week or maybe 3-week notice if the prime minister is going to do that. There's a lot of speculation about doing that. The gamble is if he guesses wrong, then the gap between their majority with the Komeito and the LDP together, they're missing 13 votes. It could be bigger. But in any event, even it's bigger or smaller, it's still not a majority. So they still have to fight. They still have to cajole somebody in the opposition camp to vote with them. It costs too much in time. It costs too much in concessions. He doesn't want to do that. On the other hand, the LDP could come in really strong, do really well in the upper house and in the lower house, and eclipse that 13-seat deficiency. That's why Koizumi, as the new agriculture minister, is so important. For most observers, it's not that huge a deal, but for the Japanese voters, for the Japanese rank and file members, it's a big deal. Koizumi is attractive. His dad was prime minister. He's got new ideas. He's fresh. He's young. It's time for a change. And if the LDP can, accommodate that kind of a change, then yeah, maybe I'll vote for them. So the other complicating factor here is we have the elections for the Tokyo Metropolitan. And as in the United States, when the United States sneezes, Japan catches a cold. Similarly, when Tokyo has a bad election on the LDP, it does have an impact on the LDP nationwide. So, more than almost 20% of the Japanese population lives in the Kanto region. So it really dictates, all of the main headquarters are located here. The seat of government is here. All of the ministries are located here. So what happens in Tokyo really is a bellwether to what else is happening. So we've got the Tokyo elections on the 22nd in 2 weeks. And then there's 4 weeks left before the election of the upper house. And in that time, the prime minister might call for a closure of the house. The opposition parties might call for a no confidence motion. I give that one a lower score. There's just too much for there to be a no confidence motion. It must be submitted by a party who has 51 or more seats in the lower house. Of the opposition parties, there's only one party who has 51 seats or more, and that's Mr. Noda's Constitutional Democratic Party. The relationship between Mr. Noda and Mr. Ishiba has been up again and down again. It seems like it's on tenterhooks right now. So Mr. Ishiba has kind of wagged his finger at Mr. Noda and says, if you begin to pretend even that you're going to launch a no confidence motion, I'm going to close down the House. And in any event, if the Constitutional Democratic Party decides to sponsor a no confidence motion, they need to have 51% of the votes of the entire lower house. That's 233 votes. Everybody in the opposition camp needs to vote against the LDP in order for that vote to carry. And if it does carry, the prime minister is given a choice. The no confidence motion carries, and then there will be an election. And within, I think, 50 days, there must be an election for all of the members of the lower house, or the prime minister can resign, and then there's an election that happens. And the prime minister and the entire cabinet would resign, and then it would go in for an election. And that gives the real power to the prime minister. So there's this game that's going on there, and it's something that we're watching very carefully. So keep your eyes open for the next 2 or 3 weeks. There's going to be a lot of political action going on there. Let me see what else. As I said, today is the 50th day of the Expo, the Osaka Expo. It's strange that there are no foreign visitors, and usually what happens is in the Expo, they will select one country or one pavilion to have their national day. And I guess there were a lot of national days over the last 2 weeks, because I've not seen on the prime minister's schedule heads of state or kings or princes as there was last week. The King of Denmark was here opening the pavilion, visiting Osaka, and really making a lot of fanfare there. But I don't see any of that going on this week. The other thing that's going on, for me, it's pretty important, is the end of the Pacific War. 80 years. It will be this August 15th, and the prime minister has been scratching his head how he's going to deal with that. This is a seminal moment for this prime minister. It will be after the upper house elections or the dual elections, but it's a big deal if this prime minister is still seated as prime minister, and all indicators are that he will be. The LDP is likely to do well in the upper house election, and thereby retaining Mr. Ishiba because he's been victorious. There could be a call for an election, but in any event, this date in history stands. And in recognition of that, I mentioned that the emperor and the empress, Emperor Naruhito and Empress Masako, visited Okinawa for 2 days. They brought their daughter, Princess Aiko, with them. And this is pretty important. So you might not know, but when the emperor visits any place in Japan, it's usually for an overnight or for a dinner or something like that. And whoever is hosting it, it's an economic development opportunity, because everything that the emperor is going to touch needs to be brand new. It's not going to be used. All the cutlery, all of the silverware, all of the bed sheets, all of the towels, everything must be brand new, because it's the emperor visiting. So it's a huge economic potential there. But with regard to Okinawa, it's a really sad time of human history. What happened in Okinawa, it was the largest battle by far in the Pacific War. If Japan lost Okinawa, then many people said, it's just a matter of time, because once they're in Okinawa, they can have the airstrips, and then they can hit all of Japan with the bombers that would be stationed there. And the sad thing about it is that there were 200,000 Japanese war victims from Okinawa, and the U.S. suffered 183,000 casualties. That means that there were about 12,000 deaths and 49,000 wounded or missing. That's about 6.8% in deaths and 26.8% in wounded. So of all of the people that went there from the U.S. side, that means of every 10, 6 are going to be, or 6% are going to be killed, and a quarter of them are going to be injured. So the fighting was very deadly. 90 days was the length of the battle. For the Japanese, they had 77,000 Japanese soldiers, and they were joined by about 20,000 Okinawan conscripts, either volunteers or recruited into the war effort. This began even before the Americans started showing up and shelling the island. The military deaths in Okinawa were 77,000. That means that of all the Japanese soldiers that were defending Okinawa, there was a 100% casualty rate. For the civilians, the civilian population in Okinawa before hostilities began was 300,000. And the deaths in Okinawa afterwards, they did a calculation there, more than 1/3 of the civilian population perished as a consequence of the war. So the Okinawa campaign started on April 1st. We recognize that on this program. As many of you know, I grew up on Okinawa, so Okinawa holds a very special place in my heart. I've visited, I've played in and explored all of the battlefields as a young boy growing up there. And the end of the battle will be on June 22nd. So in just 2 weeks, it'll be the end. August 6th, not quite a month afterwards, was the first bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Nagasaki. And then 6 days later, the surrender on the battleship Missouri, and the war ended. So the Emperor and the Empress recognized that, and it's something that I think will be a big deal here in Japan. 80 years that conflict. I don't mean to dwell too much on it, but it's rather significant. As I mentioned, the South Koreans elected a new president after a 60-day campaign. What a tumultuous campaign it's been. You might remember that Mr. Yoon, president, was impeached. He ordered martial law, and then in a couple of hours after that, he withdrew martial law. It caused a huge political storm. He was kicked out of office. His main competitor when he won as prime minister is the current president now, and he won by just a very, very tiny margin. So the politics was very fractious there. Mr. Yoon relied heavily on the U.S. and Japan relationship. It was one of the hallmarks of his presidency, and between the three countries, they began to form this alliance and this union about being against what was going on in North Korea, having exercises and joint exercises throughout the peninsula, and also joining with efforts of the United States and Japan in the region here. But excuse me, the current president was attacked. He was also almost assassinated before the campaign started. So we expect he's on the progressive side of the political spectrum compared to Mr. Yoon, who was on the conservative side. So we do anticipate there's going to be some major policy shifts in Korean politics going forward. And so we'll just have to wait and see how that shakes out. As I mentioned, the economic revitalization minister, Mr. Akazawa, left for the United States on Wednesday. He met with the Commerce Secretary Litnick on Thursday, and then on Wednesday he met with the main negotiator, Treasury Secretary Besant, on Friday, and then he came back yesterday to report to the prime minister. There is a bit of a kind of a go slow approach. He's met for the last 3 weeks. Every week, Mr. Akazawa has been in Washington, D.C., pursuing these meetings. There has been some progress made, and I think they're aiming for some sort of a conclusion at the G7 summit in Alberta, Canada, on the 15th of this month. So today is what, the 8th? Today is the 8th. So in just a week, they'll be meeting, and that is the time that they're gearing up for a signature between Japan and the United States on these tariffs. If they don't make that deadline, and it's hard to say right now that they will or they won't, there's still a little bit of time before the pause of the implementation of the tariffs goes into effect, or the pause is withdrawn. And I think that's on July 9th. So the United States has July 4th as their Independence Day, big celebration there. A couple of days later, the pause for the tariffs goes into effect, and then the tariffs are applied 25% on automobiles, on 24% across the board, and on many of the reciprocal tariffs as well. So there's a lot that's going to be happening over just the next 2 or 3 weeks with regard to that, and we anticipate maybe during the G7, but I think it's a little bit more difficult. The Japanese aren't quite getting what they wanted. It's impacting other things, and maybe impacting what the Japanese will have a little bit of distaste for with the U.S. steel purchase. So it looks like it's not going to be a full purchase, more of a partnership, and they might acquiesce on that big deal just in order to get over this hurdle here. So it remains to be seen, but we're going to be watching that very carefully. I think that's most of the top issues that I have, Maya. I'm sure I've missed some of them, and I haven't touched on the ones that are really important that I have touched upon in enough detail, but we can draw those out in the Q&A period, and I really appreciate everybody tuning in and participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. Well, and we're moving into the Q&A very soon. Before we do that, once again, I want to say, of course, thank you to you, because you spent time to bring us up to pace with what is going on in Japanese politics, and I can see that the appreciation is growing. Again, if you haven't subscribed yet to any of the channels you're watching, our channels, please do subscribe and let us know that you have been there by hitting like or leaving a comment or a question. Again, yes.
And not only that, Maya, not only do we do this presentation, I mean, we do this because this is something that we contribute to the general community, but also we make a living. Both you and I make a living on doing public policy. You do cross-cultural communications. But if you have issues, if your company is doing business in Japan and you have issues, that's what I do for a living. So it's not just talking and about Japanese politics. That's a sidebar. But if you do have issues in Japan at the political or the regulatory area, please give us a call.
Well, thank you. Yes, for that, please do give us a call. And now we're moving to the Q&A. We've got quite a few questions today again, which is great. Thanks a lot to everybody who left a question or a comment there. We're very happy to go through them and answer them to the best of our ability. And of course, if we cannot, please help us do that with comments and some data in the comments as well. All right, so starting with the very, very first... Okay, so we have questions from questions, a lot of them on LinkedIn, but I cannot read all of them there. And that is, the person who left them, please forgive me for not doing that. But still, I'll start with some of the questions and go through the others. Here we go. Cam on Clubhouse. So, Cam says, will Ishiba attend President Trump's birthday and military parade next week? How will his presence or absence be interpreted in context of the ongoing tariff negotiations?
It would probably be a very good idea to do that as a gesture. I don't think it's going to happen. I think there's just way too much going on with this prime minister, and at this particular point in time, to take 3 days off to travel to the United States, to go to Mar-a-Lago to participate, and then to take another day to come back. I just don't see it. And I don't see that this prime minister, the foreign ministry might advise him differently, but I don't see the prime minister taking that opportunity. I think there's just too much going on. There's a lot going on with the economy, with the rice prices, with the inflation. I don't see it happening, but let's see.
All right. Yes, we'll see and we'll report on this. Whether it happens or not, we'll report on this next week. The next question is about the rice, ongoing rice deficit here. Hiroko-san says, just give me a second. That she says approximately 1 million tons are reserved by the government. The volume of rice discharge now totals 610,000 tons. At the current pace, isn't it likely to run out by the end of this year? So the question is, will this 1 million tons, the amount of rice that has been stored by the government, will it be enough or not? What do you think, Timothy?
Okay, when you introduced this topic, Maya, you said the deficiency in rice. I don't think there's a deficiency in rice. There's a deficiency in the market. But the producers of rice, Japan produces enough rice for consumption, for its national. It doesn't need to import rice to feed all of the rice that the people consume here. And I think the question is, does the production that is predicted, won't that run out at the end of the year? And I think what you mean is by the end of the year before the new rice comes into production. But if you mean by December, I'm almost positive that there's enough rice to get the Japanese economy through December into the 2026. But it's the winter months that really count. That's when you start going into your stockpiles. And the reason why there's a deficiency, the Japanese government has relaxed some of their requirements on the amount of land that is required for planting rice and the amount of revenue that the farmers are going to anticipate. And so what's happened is the farmers have a little bit more flexibility in selling it to wholesalers. So what's happened is when the rice goes into the warehouses from the farmers, it is purchased in advance by the wholesalers, and they're holding on to it. They're holding on to it because they're hoping that by restricting the market, the price goes up, and then they can sell it in March or April or May and get a pretty penny for it. But now it's caused a huge problem, and now we've lost an agricultural minister as a consequence of that, and the prime minister is looking at it. They had a meeting on Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday. It might have been Wednesday. A big meeting where with the prime minister, the chief cabinet secretary, the secretary of land and infrastructure, the secretary of agriculture. I'm sorry, the Minister of Agriculture, talking about the price of rice and what we're doing with the rice policy. So it is currently undergoing a huge revamp. This is very rare, and rice has never really been that big of a topic of conversation. I mean, you have rice and the price is sometimes up and it's sometimes low, but this year it's just remarkable. It's almost double the price that it was a year ago. So it has reached a kind of a fever pitch, and I think there will be some real repercussions as a consequence of that. But what has come out of the last 2 weeks is that the Japanese government is releasing the stockpiles it had for 2023, then 2022, and now 2021 is going into the market right now. So 2022, they released that stockpile maybe 10 days ago, and it was almost completely sold out. 2021 is the last year they can stockpile it. Once rice becomes a little bit older than that, it's really qualified as animal feed. It's not fit. I guess it's not fit for human consumption. They don't sell it in the market. So that market will be opened, and the price of rice there will really plummet. It'll be less than 2,000 yen for a 5-kilo bag, and that's really remarkable. But it's not the fresh rice. It's not the new rice. So it just waits to be seen. And it's just a couple of months before the new rice comes into the market too. So we're just at the tail end of the production from last year. I hope that somewhat is responsive.
Well, I hope so. And yes, Hiroku-san, if you need more clarification or want to share further thoughts, please let us know. And I'm moving to another question by Rossi Lamont Water, because we are on the topic of rice and food. And
Rose is
Timothy,
on fire.
yes, he's on fire, and I'm grateful for that. Okay, so Timothy, you and, well, Langley Square published an article about food security 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And there you talk about the illusion of control over the food security. And so the questions of Rossi Lamont Water, there are a couple of them here about that article. So the first one, what does the illusion mean, illusion of control mean, and how and why did it happen?
Okay.
The government has this illusion of control over food security, right? And then the question is, how did it happen, and what does it mean for people
Well,
who are not in Japan?
we all have this. Yes, if you live in Japan, Japan comes across as, I mean, the food culture here is so rich, and the amount and the variety of food is so, it's so enormous. And you can go to Indian, you can go to Spanish, you can go, just the amount and the quality of food is just astounding. You go to the supermarkets, especially the high end ones, and you see the the variety of fruits and vegetables that are there and how beautiful they look, and also sometimes the enormous prices. So Japan does produce, and for the export market, fruits and vegetables, but it also produces for their own consumption. Unfortunately, not enough to fill the need of Japanese consumers. But in order to keep the security and the confidence of the voters, there is this illusion that there is plentiful supply. There is food available. You can get fruits and vegetables, and you have rice and meats and that sort of thing. But hardly any of the meat comes from Japan. Most of the meat is coming from Brazil or the United States. Pork, a lot of pork from Denmark and the Netherlands. Chicken from Brazil and Thailand. So a lot of the food, I mean, less than 30% is what Japan can supply in terms of calorie intake of the normal Japanese person. So the rest of it needs to be imported. But the illusion that it is plentiful, it's available, and we talked about Marubeni, we talked about Itochu, we talked about these trading houses that, as you might recall, Warren Buffett has invested in heavily. He sees how strong and what an essential component they are of getting the economy going and keeping people, fed, and keeping people calm and mild and, complacent with the Japanese government. So those are the kinds of suggestions of illusion that I was referring to. But I think if you live in Japan, you notice it quite a bit, and you're wondering, how can Japan keep going this way? Because the debt to GDP ratio is just enormous compared to anybody else in G20. The Japanese, I mean, it's 250% plus their debt to GDP ratio. So Japan is just such a complicated and just a marvelous place. I mean, people who live here, all their lives, even Japanese, have a difficulty explaining and understanding it. So I'm really
Right.
grateful for this opportunity to talk
Okay.
about it.
And there is a follow-up question. Actually, there are two follow-up questions to this one. Well, about the illusion, who benefits from it is the next question. And okay, I don't think there is. Yes, there is a lot of conspiracy in this topic anyway. But Timothy, yes, go
Okay.
ahead.
So whoever is the creator of the illusion is typically the one who benefits from that. And that's not just an isolated incident in Japan. It's same in the United States. Propaganda works. Keep people confident in your governance. Keep people confident in what you can do. There are many people that look at Koizumi, for example, and they say, "How can that guy even pretend he's going to be prime minister?" But it's happened before, and he does have several attributes that really propel him into the public eye. So that's that's something of an illusion. But I think running a society and a government and an economy, takes a lot of different tools and attributes, and being in charge of what the message is and how people receive their messaging is critically important in keeping that kind of on an even keel. So I don't mean it in such a pejorative way, as you've said, Maya. It's not something to suggest a conspiracy, but it is, running a government, running an economy. This is, Japan is maybe the fourth largest economy in the world. It was the second, then the third, and maybe the fourth right now. And within 15 months, it'll probably be fifth or sixth. So there's a lot of change going on, and the government is using whatever tools it has at its disposal to remain in power, to keep the economy going, to encourage people to buy more things, even though their income might be decreasing relative to inflation. So it's a real, that's why I think the prime minister is not going to go to Mar-a-Lago for the president's birthday party.
All right, and then one more question about this. What are the candidate paths, the possible pathways towards food sovereignty for Japan?
That's so I touched on that very lightly in the article, and one of that is just food diversification. So it's funny if you I think like everybody else, but for Japanese, when they travel overseas, they can travel overseas for a day or 2 days, but on the third day, they really want rice and miso soup. There's a very low tolerance for being that far separated. It might just have to do with the digestion and things like that. But for a lot of other countries, they can travel overseas and they can be okay, but pretty soon, they want a McDonald's. The president of the United States is pretty much like that too. And I think people are kind of married to their food. So having food diversification is really difficult. Japan, the staple here is rice. It's not bread, it's rice. So maybe diversifying from rice into something else, some other staple, but that's a long, long haul. The other thing is just food that, they're not even producing enough fruit and vegetables and supplementary like chickens here in Japan. They farm that out. So with the decline of the Japanese population, especially the number of farmers and people who are involved in livestock continuing to decrease, Japan needs to rely more and more on imported food. And that is the critical element of the article. And the question too, how does Japan establish self-sufficiency in food? And it was 78% 25, 30 years ago that Japan was producing. 75% of the caloric intake of the Japanese consumer was provided by Japan. And over the last 25 years, it has just decreased to less than 30% today. So changing that around is very difficult, and I don't know if people have the appetite for that. So if something happens, if there's an embargo or there's a war or something like that, Japan is going to become very quickly hit with the reality of not having enough food to supply its population.
Right, and we have a follow-up comment from Hiroku-san. She says, thank you for the comment. What is important about the rice issue is farmers are not making enough money.
Yep.
And she says, I wouldn't mind paying more if farmers make decent profit. And I think that the majority of population actually thinks the same way. The question is, what's the mechanism there? And then the cost benefit, the cost revenue mechanism. And probably it is an old, outdated one, and it needs to be revised and changed. But once again, like everything else, it will take time. And hopefully we're not going to lose the people, willing to produce rice here in Japan as well.
So what this meeting that was at the Prime Minister's residence this last week talked about was somehow supplementing the amount of money that the farmers get. So even though the amount of money that they get for a kilo of rice is this, the Japanese government is going to increase that so that they get a little bit better of a revenue stream, and then people are more encouraged to do that. So right now it's, the kids, they go to college, they don't want to go back to the farm. They want to go work in the big cities, and they want to work for a high-tech company or maybe a startup and, make a lot of money. Even for people who typically would go into the government and the government pays well and has a very good job security, the kids nowadays are more likely to go into the international companies for that better revenue.
Right. Okay. So we're moving to a different topic now. That is the election and the possible dissolution of the House. So the question comes from Byron Johnston, and it is: could you comment on the threat by PM Ishiba to dissolve the House of Representatives if there is a no confidence motion introduced by the combined opposition? Number one, how empty or full is that threat, since it only proves that the current government is a minority government that will likely fall if put to a vote?
Yeah, that's a great observation, Byron. So there are two ways to look at this. One is that the opposition files a no confidence motion. If they do that, they need to do that pretty quickly, and it's right in the middle of the Trump tariff talks. So if they file for a no confidence motion, it's going to complicate those discussions. It's going to involve the entire government into closing down the House and going for another election. So people who are behind that, maybe Mr. Noda and the Constitutional Democratic Party, but he can't do it by himself. He needs to combine with the Ishin no Kai and the Democratic Party for the People, and they're not such good friends with each other. They're not really chummy, and it remains to be seen if Mr. Noda can convince them to go for a no confidence motion. Not everybody's going to benefit from that. So that's on one side. On the other side, the prime minister can close down the House, or what he threatened was, if you start to file a no confidence, if you even suggest it, I'm going to close down the House. I'm going to take the initiative and I'm going to close down the House. And what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is I'm going to lose more seats in the lower house in a double election, but I could just as easily increase my seats. And it's worth the gamble having this situation where I have to talk to you idiots every time I want to have a revision to any bill, or I'm trying to pass any legislation. I'd rather just be the bull in the china shop and just do what I want to do. And that means I have to supplement these 13 votes that I'm lacking in the lower house. I don't want to do that. So it's a huge gamble. It really depends on a lot of other atmospherics, and that's why the Koizumi appointment is so important. For a lot of people, the fact that he is now the farm minister, the agriculture minister, and the aggressive stance that he's taking is a boost into the appreciation of the LDP. And these kinds of things are very ethereal. So how people feel on the day of voting really has an impact. If it's raining, it has an impact. And it could be just the slightest thing, and then the LDP could come back and have that majority. That is what the gamble is. If they close down the House because of the opposition party, I don't think that vote of no confidence would succeed. In order to do that, you have to have 51% or more than 50% of the lower house voting for it. I don't know if the opposition can pull that off.
Right. There is a follow-up question here. Can you explain how the opposition would regard this threat by PM Ishiba? After all, no member of the House of Representatives wants to run again for re-election within 1 year of the last election.
Right. And if you're Ishin didn't do so well in the last election. The Democratic Party for the People did. They increased their numbers from 8 to 28. So they want to do that again. They want to do that again in the upper house. And if they're given an opportunity in the lower house, they call for an election. The prime minister does, or they join in a no confidence motion. I'm good for that. That's Mr. Tamaki's position. The Constitutional Democratic Party with Mr. Noda, that's a little bit more difficult because there are factions within the Constitutional Democratic Party as well. The former leader is now a sub-leader, and Mr. Noda is the current leader. But these guys, there are different factions there, and Mr. Ozawa is also in the Constitutional Democratic Party, and he is kind of criticizing the leader, Mr. Noda, about being a little bit weak in his projections about what he's going to do, what he intends to do. He should take the bull by the horns. He should be a little bit more aggressive there. But it's a very delicate tightrope. And it could be that, yes, Mr. Noda loses his position as leader of the Constitutional Democratic Party because of the decision that he made. So there's a lot riding on that. And I think Mr. Noda is a little bit more clever than that. I don't think he's going to muster the forces to do a no confidence motion. And although there are a lot of pundits who say it's going to be a double election, we've heard that before, Maya. In our channels, there's a lot of people who say it's just good timing. The people in politics are gamblers, if nothing else. They don't want to lose their seat, but they don't want to have to negotiate with the opposition party as well. So it might be worth it. And in one calendar year, and within 12 months to have two elections, you could be criticized for that, spending that money and having the election. And it's just for your own benefit. It's not for the population. It's not for addressing the inflation rate or the price of rice. It's just because you want to have more power. You're just a bunch of crybabies. So there's that too.
Right. And one more question from Byron. In other democracies, the ruling party leadership would cobble together a coalition with small parties, such as DPFP, to prevent such unnecessary election. Is there such a team in place to maneuver in that respect in Japan? Not much confidence in Mr. Moriyama to pull that off?
Yeah, I'm of your thinking too, Byron. I would have thought that bringing somebody else in is cheaper. It's more reliable to close that gap other than having an election. But the problem here is maybe Mr. Tamaki. So they've had this opportunity for the last 6 months to negotiate with Mr. Tamaki to try and get him to come in a little bit. I mean, he does represent the Democratic Party for the People. They went from 8 to 28. So you have to give them a little bit of credit. They are kind of LDP light. They're not really an opposition party with lots of fractures on LDP policy. They do have a couple of pet peeves. But I think Mr. Tamaki has been really difficult to deal with. And the LDP is just up to here. They're just through with it. And then you've got Mr. Noda. The Ishin no Kai, the leadership with Ishin is fractured. The leader of Ishin is the governor of Osaka. So he's not even a member of parliament. And you've got the subhead, who is Mr. Maida, who is a member of parliament. But it's just not, it doesn't feel like it's quite a ready party to, I mean, they're still trying to cobble together a regional force and then go a little bit more national. So in my eyes, the best bet would be the Constitutional Democratic Party, the LDP, Komeito, and the Democratic Party, for the Constitutional Democratic Party join forces. But that's, in fact, Mr. Noda was encouraging that. Why, Mr. Ishiba, are you listening to these guys? One has 38 members, one has 28 members. We've got more than 150. So, we're the adults in the room. We should guide the economy. We should guide the politics of this country. We should join forces. It doesn't look like that's going to happen either. Maybe because of personality, or maybe because the realization that even if we form a coalition, we still have to negotiate with them. They're not going to like everything, and it's going to be internal. But and plus we have to give them one, maybe two cabinet seats. Which one do we give them? They're going to want foreign ministry. They're going to want maybe finance. They're going to want something really sweet. We can't give that to them. They're going to insist on it. So, Mr. Tamaki, there was a conversation maybe 4 weeks ago. I will join with the LDP. We'll make a coalition government, but I want to be prime minister. That was his ask. And there was some consideration. It might be worth it. Make him prime minister, just as long as we have that other 13 votes, and then we can at least get things going. So it's a high stakes gamble.
It is indeed. It is. And as many people say, politics is gambling all the way through. So we'll see what happens. There is also a comment by Seiichiro Manabe-san. He says, regarding the Okawara Kakoki accusation case. So Timothy, I think you alluded to it, or So this is a case which actually has been going on for several years, and this is the company Okawaraka Koki. So the executives were basically accused of selling machines, dryers to China, dryers which can be used for military purposes, even though they were sold, to civilians. And Seiichiro Manabe-san writes, regarding the Okawaraka Koki false accusation case, the government is considering abandoning the appeal. What do you think will be the impact on economic security and the actions of the prosecution?
Yeah, I'm not up to speed on that one, Manabe-san. You probably, I can just tell by the tone of your question, you've got far more insight and information on that. There are, people want to they want their companies to be successful. Maybe they make gears for bicycles, or they make homing devices for drones, that sort of thing, that do have military applications, and they have to go through a process in Japan to make sure that they go to somebody who is not an adversary to Japan, or it can't be used for offensive weaponry. And that's the issue here. But it happens quite a bit. Sometimes even the regulators don't appreciate the offensive capabilities of some of these devices, and it takes a little bit of time. I'm not up to speed on this particular, the dryers, but if it's important, maybe we can get into it, or maybe you can educate us a little bit better on that.
Yes, yes, Manabe-san, please feel free, and we would appreciate your help there. And moving on, then I'll go back to Clubhouse in a bit. Before that, I wanted also to read one question from LinkedIn, and it is from Frederick Gunluck.
Yep.
If CDP joins in with LDP, they dilute their opposition power. Then
Yep.
CDP gets blamed for any bad things going on. Recent German politics is an insight regarding this. And I'm thinking about how the recent pension finance deal using the employer pension surplus to boost the basic pension is one area where, if it becomes unpopular later, LDP will blame CDP. So, yes, these are insights shared by Frederick on LinkedIn. Timothy, would you like to comment on this? Or
Not just that. I mean, that's a great point, but also you have to remember that the Constitutional Democratic Party is not a unified body. The LDP is not a unified body. I mean, there's a right-hand side to it. There's a left-hand side to it. There are influential people, Sanai Takaichi, for example, on the right-hand side of that spectrum. And then you've got it all the way over to the left-hand side. There are people that, I mean, the LDP has been described as a tent full of lots of, other circuses going on under the big tent. But the Constitutional Democratic Party is as well a coalition of like-minded people. They're bound together, but they don't always love each other. They don't always vote the same way. And critically important in that is Mr. Ichiro Ozawa, who was, for many years the kingmaker. He's kind of gone quiet. He's kind of backed down a little bit, but he was and remains to be a very influential person. And if he's in your political party, he is somebody that carries a lot of weight, and you have to pay attention to him. He's become a little bit more outspoken these days. So whatever way the Constitutional Democratic Party goes, it's not only Mr. Noda's decision. He will suffer, or he will benefit as a consequence of that. But it's a big deal. We're not going to know for the next 2 or 3 weeks, but there's a lot bubbling on the surface there.
okay, yes, we'll continue following this as well. Now, moving to one of the questions about US and China rare metal agreement. How do you think it will, or what impact will that agreement have on Japan? This is a question from Hiroaki Nakanishi.
Okay, Hiroaki-san always has really great insight, very high level, piercing questions that I already know he probably has the answer to. The thing with rare metals and China is not that China has the stock. It doesn't have the source of rare metals. It's producing them. So that production facility of getting these rare earth metals into a usable form takes 20 years, refining, mining, and smelting, that sort of thing. So the United States is desperately in need of it. The Chinese have focused on producing it and stockpiling it. And I think they kind of have the United States over the barrel because the United States needs that for a lot of different, not just commercial, but military uses as well. So I think this will be a real sticking point in the negotiations. And I think that's what drove the president of the United States, who initiated this call, by the way. This 90-minute call that we had just this last week was initiated by the United States to have this phone call and this discussion. It seemed to have been, reports are that it seemed to be very cordial, and progress was made, and they said what needed to be said, and maybe it opens the door for other things. But with rare earths, it's like increasing the number of workers in Japan. Women have more children. It's not going to produce any results for 20 years or 30 years before they begin to get into the labor market. Similarly with rare earths. I don't know if Australia or Brazil or even the United States is ramping up the production of that, but it does take a long time to get that into a marketable production.
Okay, moving to Clubhouse now from Cam. Cam writes, I noticed Japan is working on a bill to deny entry to foreigners with unpaid medical bills. Will this policy disproportionately target the foreigners?
That sure.
Japan needs to perform skilled work. So this is will the policy target these foreigners who Japan needs actually to come here and do the skilled work? What do you think?
There are a couple of things that are going on there that seem counterproductive to increasing the number of workers in Japan, whether they're Japanese or foreigners. There are a couple of things that are going on. One is maybe the elimination of the sales for tourists that come in. So if you're a tourist and you come to Japan and you buy products, you buy toilet seats or you buy Japanese sake, you don't pay a tax on that. It's a duty free. They're thinking of eliminating that. That impacts foreigners. It doesn't impact the Japanese. And I think that one's going to sail through. This other one on unpaid medical bills, to me, impacts people who have been here. They're contributing to the Japanese society. Maybe they have a short-term or a long-term visa. They rack up some medical bills. They go back to their country for a vacation or a wedding, and they come back and they're not allowed in because immigration has fingered them for unpaid medical bills. That's what it appears to me. So it's once again, it's a revenue generator. It is a kind of a focus on the foreigners, not on the Japanese nationals. But I think that's well within the parameters of running a government. If you've got, and Japan has a nationalized health system, so one way or the other, you're going to participate in that. You just need to pay into the system because they don't have a system here where you go and you pay $500 and you get a new set of teeth or you get the new liver. It's a nationalized health insurance. You can purchase a commercial health, but that's not the typical standard. So I think what it is a push to get everybody participating and contributing to the national health, because the number of people that are getting older is growing, and the people who are paying that, the people who are productively employed, that's getting smaller. So the amount of their salaries going to support the health of the aging population, which increasingly needs more and more health services, something's got to give because it's going to break. The system's going to break, and you're seeing a lot of these ideas coming to the fore to help solve that. And once again, the budget that was passed on April 3rd of this year, the largest budget that the Japanese government has passed to date, is more than 50% supplied or paid for by debt, by issuing debt. So one of the reasons we opened the show with talking about the yen-dollar ratio, and one of the reasons why the yen is strengthening and then weakening is because what's going on in the United States. But the United States Fed and the Treasury also has kind of scolded Japan and saying you need to get your house in order. You're manipulating the markets by supporting the yen, and your debt to GDP ratio is totally out of whack. You need to get back to the fundamentals, and you need to let the yen find its own value. So it's really multi-layered, and it's very complex. But yeah, I think the Japanese are looking for a lot of different ways to supplement the amount of income that's coming in addition to reducing the amount of expenditures that are going out.
Indeed. Okay, so thank you very much. With this, it seems that we have gone through the questions. At least there are many comments also on YouTube, and for everybody who wants to read the comments there as well, I invite you to check out our YouTube channel and this session there. Also, once again, if you're curious about, you haven't read yet the articles we talked about that were published on Langley Esquire's website about immigration, about food security, and also sorry.
Military expenditures.
Yes, the military expenditures, they are available on the website of Langley Esquire in their library. So everybody can go there, read them. Also, you can leave a comment there. And that's all for the moment. Thank you very much for staying with us. It was a pleasure being here and delivering these news for you today. Of course, we have been told that it's good to have a different perspective from the one which is usually available in the Japanese media. So we'll continue doing this. And again, if you have questions or comments, do not hesitate to leave them on this or below this podcast during the week, and we'll go through over them next Sunday. Yes.
One way I know, if you appreciate this, maybe you don't appreciate it. Maybe you're just kind of listening to this while you're doing your laundry or eating breakfast. But if you do appreciate this contribution to the commentary and what's going on in U.S.-Japan relations and what's going on in Japan overall, tell a friend about it. You could hit like or post a comment to us, but go ahead and tell a friend that this is an informative and sometimes funny conversation about what's going on in Japanese politics that you might enjoy and help spread the wealth.
Indeed, very much so. Okay, that was all for today. Thanks a lot and have a great weekend. Also a bright new week. We'll see you again next Sunday, 8:20.
Thanks, Maya.
Thank you, Timothy.
See you next Sunday.
See you next Sunday.